Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, we produce so much food. I mean, Jordan, it's crazy, right? We have 25% food surpluses. I mean, we produce 25% more food than we need. We've never had surpluses that large of share of total food production or the total size. And during the same period when we're using less and less land. So we're producing more and more food on less and less land. This is like one of the greatest human success stories of all times. We struggle with overweight. We struggle with obesity. We struggle with having too much food. In the future, we're going to struggle with not having enough people. In some countries, we already are. I mean, that gives me some hope is that, the New York Times had a front page story a few weeks ago about how, the problems related to not having to negative population growth, right? To population declines. We knew really in the late 60s, at the time when hysteria over overpopulation was the highest, we knew that the rate of increase had peaked and declined. And so we really had to put up with another 20 years of just this apocalyptic nonsense around too many people. My hope is that the same thing will happen with climate change. I mean, it's already happening. Carbon emissions, as you pointed out, have declined in the United States by 22% since 2005.
Yeah, and why is that? We should have a little chat about that. Yeah. Why is that? Because no one predicted this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, natural gas in the short version.
Right, fracking.
From fracking.
I was very familiar with that because fracking was everywhere in northern Alberta, which is saturated with hydrocarbons everywhere, so it was a big part of the economy, and fracking was par for the course there 40 years ago. But and this is so interesting too from an economic perspective when you're thinking about environmental policy. It's like these environmental breakthroughs did not come where we expected them to come. And you cite an MIT scientist on page 105. I wanted to read this because it's so unlikely. I hope I've got it in the right place here. I won't read it. I'll just say it. He says, if you really wanted to decrease carbon in the atmosphere, you might want to accelerate the rate at which coal is being burned in India. So let's unpack that, because you think coal and India and lower carbon, what's that about?
That's Kerry Emanuel from MIT, and he points out that rising prosperity, coal-powered prosperity now will result in people choosing to have fewer kids, and therefore you'll have fewer people in the future producing more pollution. The specifics of how that works, I mean, that's basically the whole story, is that prosperity, we should view prosperity as essential to protecting the natural environment, in part because of declines of population, but also because we end up moving towards cleaner sources of energy.
Right, once you get away from wood, so wood's really bad. Then coal, well, coal's got a lot cleaner, way cleaner, as you point out in your book. And so
yes.
that's a really good thing. And so, but coal isn't as good, let's say, as natural gas. And maybe natural gas isn't as good as nuclear. Now, who knows? Because that's complicated, but it's a possibility. And so you want to get people away from wood as fast as possible. That's part of that getting away from zero too, right? In terms of economic growth, is when you're at a subsistence level, you don't have enough time to be making the future better. You're just trying to survive today. You can't get off the ground. And for the first time in human history, we could get everyone off the ground. No one would have to be at zero.
Absolutely.
And to give the radical leftist types credit, at least hypothetically, they're concerned with all those people that are stuck at zero. Well, but the unexamined environmentalism is interfering with that in very complicated ways. And so, it's hard to sort this all out, obviously.
No, I mean, part of what I wanted to do to go beyond, I think, some of the traditional criticisms of apocalyptic environmentalism was to sort of say, look, there's a truly benevolent process of energy progress, from wood and dung to coal and hydroelectric dams to oil and natural gas to nuclear. So we can talk about nuclear, but basically what you're doing is you're shrinking the footprint, the land footprint required to produce those fuels to basically zero. So to give you a sense of it, like coal has at least twice as much energy as a lump of wood. You go to oil and gas, you get a significant increases, plus it's coming from underground rather than above ground, or having to destroy whole mountains as you do for coal. You get to nuclear, uranium mining. I mean, this amount, less than this amount of uranium, that amount of uranium provides me with all the power I need for my entire life. A whole high energy life is completely available to you.
Yeah, well, and we should have a bit of a chat about energy. It's like, okay, what's wealth that you want to deliver to poor people? Okay, what's wealth? energy. Make energy cheap. There's no poor people. Why? Well, because work requires energy, and work produces everything. And so if energy is dirt cheap, there aren't poor people. And so do you not want to have no poor people? It's like cheap energy, man. That's your savior. And as you said, if we do this halfway intelligently, it's always also extremely good for the planet. So, well, but the whole system has to come down because I'm depressed. So, well, that's not a very good argument. And you know, that depression issue is interesting too, because I thought about depression technically in terms of hierarchy of values for a long time. So the serotonin system, when it becomes depleted, it takes less punishment to stop someone, an animal or a human being. And so you could imagine that if you're depressed, let's say, I don't know, you forget to pick something up for your wife, eh? And if you're not depressed, you think, oh, I forgot to pick something up for my wife. I shouldn't do that again, maybe apologize. But if you're depressed, you think, well, I forgot to pick up something for my wife. Only a selfish person would do that, so that's one level up. I think I do selfish things all the time. I'm a bad person, and people are not good, and the future's bleak. And then every single negative issue cascades up the entire hierarchy until it becomes apocalyptic. That's what happens in depression. You can't buttress yourself against punishment. Well, and anxiety as well, but technically, and that's low serotonin. That's partly why people hate to have their status challenged, because status, the higher you are in status, the better the serotonin system is at dampening the response to punishment, because it assumes the environment's safer. So those are all necessary things to know when you're thinking about your own thinking, you know.